Hi, my name is Jeff and welcome back to my workshop. We're going to continue work on this Walthers wood-sided caboose that we've been following. Links to the first two videos or playlist with them is in the description below. You can see I've installed the brake gearing and the toolbox on the underframe. And the underframe's in place, but I don't have it secured in yet because that's done after we put the interior back in. So we're starting with the weight, and you can see that it's hanging up on some of the grab irons that are just sticking into the car body a little too long. But before I start trying to modify them, I'm going to try and see if I can get around the way they're in there and get this in by trying from different angles. And no, it's not going to work, so we will take care of that by getting out some flush cutting rail nippers, and we can simply cut off the ends of those grab irons that stick into the car body, and now the weight should drop in place with a little coercion. There it goes. I also off camera painted the interior, just brush painted on a couple of different greens, light green for the walls, a dark green for the cushions on the benches, and some brown on the flooring. The next step is to install the window glazing. There are some pieces of sprue that were used to hold this into the mold, so we need to remove those. And one thing I found is that you really need to sand those smooth. It is a very tight fit for the window glazing pieces in the cupola, so you got to get all that excess material off and have a smooth finish for these to get in there. And even then, it takes some work to get those windows to pop into place. The window itself is a little thicker, where it will go through into the opening so that it looks right from the outside. I already have the first one in, so now we'll get the second one in, and once we can get it into place, I found that using like the backs of my tweezers and the points of my tweezers just to kind of push it and force it in to the window helps make it easier. It took some pressure to do that. It was not easy. This may have been a case where if I had used thin clear styrene and just glued it in behind the window openings, probably would have made it easier and would have looked just as good. But with the windows in the caboose, we can install we can install the cupola onto the roof and just pop it in place, and it clips in, but I'm going to add a dot of glue to the front and rear just to give it that extra bit of strength, but not so much to create such a secure bond that it'll never come apart. So with just a spot of glue, if I do need to take it off, we can still break that glue joint and get it separated. As we put that into place, just to look at it, we can see that this caboose is starting to come together. But first we need to add the window glazing to the lower level windows and to the end doors. It's also included in the kit, and just like the cupola windows, we're going to need to make sure we sand everything smooth, and trim things to fit properly. the sides have these expansion slots to give you some leeway to move things around. I find that didn't really help much. I also found it was hard to get the windows in with the interior in, so we'll have to take that out to do that. And again, we need to make sure we remove any flash and any excess material, and sometimes just trim it down a little bit. This was a little bit too tall, so a little bit of work on the sanding stick shortened it enough that the windows could pop into place in the doors. Again, it took a lot of pressure to do that. It was a tight fit. Probably would have been less so on an unpainted model, but then you'd have to mask the windows, so. Here I'm just trimming down, filing down the grab iron ends just so that that window piece fits smoothly and in. And once it's in place, we're good to go. For the sides, as I said, these didn't fit properly, but if I trim off the expansion joints, it removes just enough material that I can pop the window pieces into place as I need to. Again, need to make sure I sand off any rough edges and that everything is smooth. As I said, this was a lot of work and probably would have been easier just to glue some thin, clear plastic over it, the way you've seen me do in other videos. But I prefer to use the parts that come with the model if it works. Once those are in, now we can set the interior in place, making sure the holes are aligned. And then we can stick the bottom back on. The underframe component with the trucks and couplers will be held in place by, there's some pins there, but the screws that hold the floor in place will also hold that together. So we don't need to use any glue there. Okay, with that done, we'll just put the screws back in, much like when I disassembled. In this case, I'm going to use my screw grabber to hold the screw, put it in place, and get the first couple of turns on. Then I can switch the screwdriver and tighten it down. This is held in by 3 screws, one in the center, one on each end. By the way, I'm going to take a moment. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss my videos. I post a video every Thursday and a short every Monday. Also, please give this video a thumbs up if you find it helpful. I do appreciate it, and it does help with the YouTube algorithm. So in the process of doing all that, the toolbox and some of the brake gear fell off. So we're just going to use some solvent cement to glue these back into place. Okay, with all of that glued back on, we'll be able to move on to finishing up this video. Okay, the last step is the end pieces. You can see I've already painted them, and I glued the brake wheel into place. There are 2 mounting pins just above on the end of the car, just above on the into the floorboards of the car on the sides, on the end rather, and 2 pins on the end rail piece. So we're just going to add a little bit of glue to the with the glue added in place like this. We can then put the end rails in place on the model, and then we'll be able to install the roof. In case you're wondering, yes, the other end is already done. I did that first off camera just to make sure I was able to do it correctly. So now we can put the roof in place. I've also glued the smokestack into the roof. And yes, I did install the stove and painted black into the caboose itself. And with the roof snapped down, I'm not going to glue this, so if I ever have to get in there, if we want to add people, we can. With that, the car just needs a little bit of weathering. I'm going to do that with some pan pastels, and I will show you the finished model there. By the way, if you want to see how I've done pan pastels, I've done that in a number of other videos, and I'm sure I'll do it again in an upcoming. Thank you for watching.